Allow me to take you back before there was Apple Music, before iPods or even the creative jukebox MP3 player, even before there were cassette tapes. No, not that far back. I'm referring to a time when the internet and television weren't the main source of entertainment. Music was. Picture yourself coming back from a long day of work and wanting to forget the world. Your eyes couldn't be drawn to a screen to check out the latest memes because we were decades away from those ever existing. During this time period, you could physically touch your music because it wasn't a bunch of ones and zeros just yet. The record and turntables were still the main source of entertainment, and it had gone through various iterations over the past decades to sound better than it did through a gramophone. You had better refined styluses, and these were a tremendous evolution over the literal needles that gramophones used. For that matter, you could connect your turntables to a proper stereo system because stereo audio just became widely available around 1958. So what's gotten me into this mood of romanticizing music and analog audio? My uncle Gus was looking to get rid of his old turntable, which obviously he had no use for any longer, and I was lucky enough to be around when he was contemplating doing this. Now this turntable wasn't in perfect working condition, but I think that was because it may have been forgotten around the time when CDs became popular, but it did seem like if it was given a little TLC, it would have been as good as new. This is the BSR UA70, and if you haven't heard of BSR before, as I hadn't, let me fill you in with some details. The Birmingham Sound Reproducers, or BSR, also later known as BSR McDonald, was a company from Great Britain and was founded in 1933 and continued to operate under the same name until 1985. From the early years, they produced high-quality PA amplifiers and portable gramophone equipment. They eventually moved on to mass-producing record players or turntables as well as record changers. They soon became well known for affordable and quality components found in many record players. In the 1960s, they also started producing reel-to-reel recorder decks. The TD2 and TD10 were also traded in Germany under the name BSR Germany. In fact, Bang & Olufsen used BSR's TD2 tape deck in their Beocord Belcanto from 1962. Fast forward to 1977, the BSR Monarch was in high demand for being the go-to record player for music consumption. Their factories were producing upwards of 250,000 units a week to meet demand, and these turntables were usually installed in console stereos and bookshelf stereo systems. So why were these so popular? Well, you weren't restricted to playing just 33s or 45s. These could play a variety of them. You could choose to play a 7-inch, 10-inch or 12-inch record, and you could choose various speeds from 16, 33 1/3, 45 and even 78 RPM. This made music listening quite convenient because if you had a whole bunch of hand-me-down records, or even if you bought a record from the store which wasn't available in a specific size or speed, you knew that your turntable could play it. The BSR turntable did not discriminate, it just worked. This specific one with me was most likely manufactured 2 years before the first moon landing, and it shows its age on every part that can be seen and wasn't exactly in perfect working condition when I first got it. A quick look from a friend of mine who is confident with working with this kind of equipment led to him discovering the idler wheel needed a change, and thanks to a quick swap out of the old and in with the new, this unit has gotten a new life. To me, this player has been a bit of a time machine because it's taken me back to a time where I didn't even exist, and think about my family meeting up and sharing laughs and even tapping their feet to the tunes of their time. This was a simpler machine for a simpler time, all in pursuit for being a little more convenient and having a few more features than all its predecessors. This very idea eventually carried on through the years, making this very device obsolete. Home audio started changing a lot in the 1980s, and the concept of having portable music was also introduced thanks to Sony's Walkman. Within the first 5 years of the 1980s, BSR closed multiple factories and thousands of workers lost their jobs. BSR made their very last turntable in 1985, and although the company is no more, its legacy lives on in the products they made over 50 years ago, which still work. So before I sign off, let me show you the magic that still exists in this player that was eventually adopted by BSR's most popular Monarch turntable. So I've got a few 45s to try out this BSR turntable with, and let's jump straight in. So right now you've got the standard spindle in, which lets you play individual records. So if I do want to put individual records onto this instead of a group of them, you can just put them on and play back. But you need to make sure that you are set on 45, and this is a 7-inch record. So you do that and you pull this down to switch it on, after which it will start spinning, but you have to pull it down here to activate the automatic mode. And then the tone arm will lift up and do what it needs to do. Now I haven't plugged this into any system right now to play back any music, because I'm pretty sure if I play back anything in this video, I will get some sort of copyright strike. But because this is a ceramic cartridge, it's pretty loud, so I can actually hear the music coming off of this. Unlike the present day MM or MC cartridges, which are a lot more silent, I need a separate phono amp to boost the signal. So now if you want this to finish playing, if you pull back down on this again, it will just return and play from the beginning, which I'll show you right now. Now why this is happening is because this arm right here, it needs to be at a resting position over the records. So only once it goes down and drops to a certain extent will the mechanism understand that the tone arm, once it reaches the end of the record, that it has reached the very last track and record. After which the tone arm will lift up and come back to its resting position, which I'll show you right now. So now I'll pull back on this and it will return to its resting position and lock into place. And it switches off as well. I'd say that's pretty cool because it's so mechanical. You haven't seen anything like this, I'm sure, if you're from my generation or from younger generations. So anyway, let's move on to how this would work as a changer. So for that, of course, you'll move this arm out of the way. You need to change this spindle right here because this is just for single-use records. Now this spindle in particular was used for the changer. 1, 2 and 3. Now you might be wondering about this arm in particular scratching up the records, but all of these records have a slight raised ridge in the middle, so the micro grooves do not get scratched up at all by this arm. So now I've placed all 3 records here. I'll put this arm on top to flatten it out so they won't be tilted. So now I'll do the same thing, which is pull down to manual. So now you get the platter turning, and for it to do its thing, you pull down to the auto mode, after which it drops one record, the tone arm releases, comes back down and starts playing your first track. So now what it does is it plays this entire track, how many ever tracks you have on the 45, or this can even do the same with 33s as well. But for the sake of demonstrating, I'll move it to the last end of the track to show what happens when it reaches the end. So it comes back, drops the next record, and the tone arm is straight away on the next track. I think this is pretty much how a lot of jukeboxes worked back in the day. So this was your own jukebox at home, where you didn't have to keep that ritual of constantly changing track after track or record after record. You could just stack all the ones you wanted, and you didn't have to worry about it constantly running or going off the record once the music was over. As soon as it reached the very last record, it would reset to its resting position. So likewise, now let's try the same thing. I'll show you what it does with the very last record. Drops the final record, this little arm, if you saw, just finally dropped. So now the machine recognizes that it is on the very last track, on the very last record rather. So now once it reaches the outro of this record, it should reset to its resting position. Let's see what it does. And there you go, music session over. Your music has been played, you have enjoyed maybe 5 or 6 records in one straight shot. This is well before CD changers or MP3s came into existence. So this was far beyond cool, and I just find this so fascinating because it's like clockwork, really. Of course, you need a power source to make this work. There is some sort of motor that's making this work. It's not absolute clockwork where you wind a spring, but it's really amazing nonetheless. The fact that this still works so flawlessly is absolutely amazing, because this thing is still well over 50 years old, and as far as I know, the only thing that has been changed is the idler wheel that has been changed very recently. It's working perfectly fine. It's not the best sounding record compared to newer age turntables, of course, because the tone arms are so much better, the cartridges are so much better, the stylus is better precision made. But this is still pretty cool for what it was. Now, am I going to plug this into my hi-fi system and use it every day? I don't think so, because there are going to be a lot of negatives that this does have with its sound reproduction. There's a lot of noise that will come through this. I know it's got little spring dampers, but there's only so much that it can do. For its time, it was considered fidelity. Now, today, of course, thanks to all the advances we've had, this will fall way back when it comes to overall sound quality. But just the way it works is just absolutely mind-blowing. So I do hope that you've enjoyed consuming this video as much as I've enjoyed making it. It's been absolutely fascinating figuring this out and doing a little research on the company. Now, of course, if you do know something about BSR that I haven't mentioned, there is a lot that I haven't mentioned, but if you would like to strike up a conversation, please feel free to drop something down in the comments below. I'd be happy to engage. And of course, thank you for tuning in to Paul's POV for some sound advice.